All right, are we okay with video?
Yeah.
Okay.
Everything's still rolling.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Our next candidate is here and ready for the interview. As I mentioned, a couple points just so the candidate also hears them. The questions will be asked first by the mayor and then around the table. The mayor will indicate the number of question that the council member will ask, which is very helpful. And then at the end, the mayor will close the questioning. So that will be the process for the question and answer session. Any questions from council as we start the second one?
No. Mr. Thomas, you're welcome to have a seat at the table or at the podium over there, whatever you're most comfortable with. Okay. All right, we good to go?
Yes.
Oh, okay, sir. Mr. Thomas, we have your background materials in front of us, but would you please begin by reviewing your professional career path and your career goals? And then please identify what specifically draws you to want to work with the city of Lincoln Park.
Yes, my name is Thomas Thomas. I have about 27 years of experience in local government. I have my master's degree in public administration, specializing in public finance. I went to graduate school because I eventually wanted to run a city, so I'm probably one of the few people I know who actually is doing what they went to college to do. I started out my career as a budget analyst for the city of Tallahassee, Florida, where I had about 5 major departments where I had to do their budgets and their capital improvement projects. That was the fire department, public works, and a few other departments. And that's why I really cut my teeth learning how to do budgets on a big scale for the city of Tallahassee. From there, I went on to become the assistant to the city manager of Rockville, Maryland. And I was there for a little over 2 years, and that was an opportunity to be involved with negotiating and dealing with unions for the first time. I really was involved in citizens issues because one of the things I was in charge of was citizen service requests. Anytime a citizen called in, emailed in, I had to get a response to any issue they had to address, from service delivery to any sort of complaint about about an employee within 5 days. I kept up with the database, and I had to put out a report that I gave to the mayor and council every 2 weeks at the council meetings. So that was a massive database system, and it was a constant flow of information and issues I had to deal with. I was also in charge of their walking town meetings, where during the spring and summer months we identified neighborhoods, working with the homeowner associations and the mayor and council. We'll go out and walk the neighborhoods with those neighbors and address issues or concerns in the neighborhood. That was something that the mayor at the time ran on, and I was tasked with implementing and making it work. Led to me getting an article in the National League of Cities on it. From there, I went to being the assistant to the city manager in Largo, Florida, back to Florida. There, I was in charge of some annexation projects, downtown redevelopment. We were trying to revitalize our downtown area, which led to a lot of eminent domain I had to deal with, dealing with once we took possession of the property, putting together for the courts. Once we gained the property, going through the process of demolishing it. One particular thing of interest about that, there was an historic home in the downtown area that we had to move. Literally, I helped move the house in the middle of the night with a construction company. That was probably one of the longest days of my life. After a regular work day, we had to get back up at midnight and move the house to another section of town where it could remain intact. Someone purchased it. At that point in time, I met the person who is my wife, and we got married, and she had a business that she was running in Illinois, an audiology business. And I left the public sector, and we ran the audiology business. I was managing it, and we managed multiple contracts with different school systems, doing hearing tests, hearing aids, things of that nature. We got to the point where our second child was born, and the workload was more than we could handle being on the road along with two children, and we were offered a buyout from a doctor's office, and we sold the business. And that's when I got back into local government. I got a job. We were living in Mount Vernon, Illinois, running the business, working and going to different test places in St. Louis, Missouri, and around that area. Got a job as a planner back in with the state of Florida, with the city of Pinellas Park, Florida. I was associate planner involved in floodplain management, dealing with developers and residential people who want to do variances on properties, doing TIF analysis for tax anticipation notes, making sure when the developer wanted to do something, we did the analysis regarding the transportation impact fees. So I did all those types of just busy work, and I had to put it together for the director to take it to the council and their decision-making to approve it. After being there about a year and a half, I was offered the opportunity to be the assistant county administrator of Dougherty County, Georgia. There's a population about 96,000. I was there for about 6 years. During my tenure there, I was involved with some huge economic development projects, helped site a super Walmart on the east side of town working with the city, built an animal shelter that was needed in our community because the one that we had was currently not in compliance, and we were being fined, and we were in a constant tug of war with the Animal Humane Society. I was able to use the penny sales tax that's passed in the state of Georgia to build a new facility, and worked out an intergovernmental agreement with the Humane Society that they would run the place for us, and we provided the building and maintenance. They had the expertise to do the service, and we had the financial resources to build it. Interesting story about that, I was involved in managing that project from beginning to the end, and near the end, we discovered the floor wasn't laid properly, and they had to pull up the whole entire floor and lay it out once again. So that was an interesting project I was involved in. Part of another project I was involved in during my time there was we had a huge park downtown that I was involved with revitalizing it. It was supposed to be a huge park that everybody in the entire county and adjoining counties would come to. There was a lot of development. It was along the river. We had to make sure address issues about flooding. We had to make it sections for it for the community to have children to come down and play in, and along with certain sections for passive recreation. I got that project done and under budget. Negotiated all the intergovernmental agreements with the city. We shared different services. In many ways, we're functionally consolidated. We contracted out recreation from them. They contracted out EMS services from us. We contracted out fire services from them. And I negotiated all those agreements with the city. I think we negotiated up to 6 or 7 agreements, and it was a great financial savings because we were sharing the services, and didn't we have to worry about having duplication of services. After being there about 6 years, I took the job to being Chief Administrative Officer for the city of Macon, Georgia. It's about a city of about 100,000. It was perhaps one of the most challenging jobs I ever had in my career. I knew when I interviewed for the job, they had some financial challenges. But I didn't realize until my first week there, and I discovered that we were making payroll with tax anticipation notes. So within those first 6 months, I had to develop a financial plan to begin to make us solvent. That's what led to the right sizing, where I went through working with the HR director who had 20 years of experience in identifying which positions we can do without, working with the department directors. We right-sized the organization. We had about 1,200 employees. We were able to right-size about 100 positions for a savings of about $3 million. I was able to redesign the entire health insurance plan for potential savings. I was able to move, we had early retirees who retired and were still on a health insurance plan. We were able to move them over to Medicare Plan B. And I implemented some strict, if you were an employee and your spouse had insurance, they had to go on their own insurance as a carve-out. That was essential savings for us. So some of the strict things I had to do. And I established the first financial policies for the city and established a reserve policy. When I left the organization, it was solvent, and we had a reserve up to about 30%, which is the standard. From there, I went to Rock Island, Illinois. It was a professional opportunity to go back to Illinois, but it was also personal. My wife's parents were aging, and she wanted to be closer to them, so I saw it as a great opportunity. During my years there, I was involved in multiple projects, citing a marijuana cultivation facility, something I discussed with one of your council members earlier today. Worked on some economic development projects. Similarities between Rock Island and your location is something that's not lost on me. Rock Island's population about 40,000. It's about 90% built out. We had the challenges of trying to bring in retail development when surrounding communities had retail development, but we didn't, because the developers tended to want clear site, and doing redevelopment, clearing of sites, dealing with potential brownfield issues was always a challenge for them. One big project we did is we had an old elementary school that had been closed up by the school district, had the potential of being historic. It was costing about $80,000 just to maintain it. I worked out an agreement with them to pay to demolish the location because I knew I had a potential buyer for the site. It fit in with the updating of the master plan outline. That area had potential for additional retail growth over the next few years. We cleared the site, and a CVS bought the location, built a brand new store there, had some outlet locations that include some retail along to a Dunkin' Donuts, Subway, some other retails. Also, during my time there, we were behind on our infrastructure. Came up with a 5-6 year plan for bringing our streets up to date. There was behind. We did a study outlining the streets that were good, stressed, and had to take top priority. One of the benefits of being in Rock Island is we had a casino that existed there, and through negotiating, we were getting about $5 million a year in revenue, our shared agreement with them for the casino. One of the things I did is I established a policy that revenue could only be used for capital improvement projects. In the past, it had been commingled in with the budget and projects and things of that nature, and I outlined to them that infrastructure issues had to take top priority. So I got that passed through with council where it would only be used for infrastructure projects. It was used toward street repair updates. It was used toward a new water filtration plant we needed to build. It was a consent decree. And it was meant for long-term updating our sewer systems that was somehow blended in with our water lines, and we had to begin to separate those out. So I consider that a major accomplishment during my time. And in my 5 years there, we never had a budget increase. And we always came in under budget because of zero-based budget and performance-based budgeting that I implemented during my time there. We had 6 or 7 unions, and I was able to negotiate 5-year labor agreements to every one of those unions. Something that had never been done in that entire area. No one thought it could be done, but me bringing in a new attorney to work with us, because the previous attorney had built up so much badwill with the unions, there was no room for that. But bringing in a new attorney, we were able to have 5-year labor agreements with the police, the fire, public works, AFSCME A, AFSCME B. I consider that a great accomplishment because knowing what we were going to be paying out for those different labor agreements over 5 years helped me better budget. It helped me better project out our expenses. When I left the organization, we had a great reserve, and we accomplished quite a degree of great projects. Final job that I worked in is during my tenure with the city of Unalaska, Alaska. Unique thing about Alaska is they never had any financial problems because it was the number one fisheries in the world. It generated a substantial amount of revenue. But because of where we were located, we didn't have mutual aid agreements. We had to depend upon ourselves. So what I did, I spent most of my time managing huge capital improvement projects. The updating of our dock facility, big $40 million project. Updating our electric utility location, keeping it compliant. Working on infrastructure projects regarding our sewer lines. Trying to work out agreements with the largest landowner, which is the Aleutian tribe, to bring in development into the location, which was challenging because they didn't sell land, they only gave long-term leases. So those are some of the accomplishments in my career, and 27 years of local government experience. And what interested me in this job, as I said, the comparison between your location and my time doing Rock Island, built out the union issues, the challenges of trying to compete and bring in retail and redevelopment, I thought would be a good fit for my skill set.
Thank you, sir. Need you to hold the microphone a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, there you go, so that
Hope you heard everything I said.
no, the people here can hear you
Okay.
fine, but we're worried about on the replay when everybody watches it later on. So,
Okay.
okay. All right, so Councilman Salcida, if you would take the second question, please.
Yes, and thanks for coming, Thomas, Mr. Thomas.
Yes.
I did some
Thomas or
res-
Thomas.
I did some research on, Alaska, the average temperature in the wintertime is 30 degrees, and it gets down to 41 below, and you're lucky to hit 70 in the summer, is that accurate?
Actually, it's not completely accurate. On a year-round basis, it averages between 30 and 40 degrees. We really don't get, year-round, it's pretty temperate. And we get about 100 feet of rain every year, too.
Thank you, interesting. All right, based on your research and understanding of the city, what do you believe are the most important opportunities and challenges for Lincoln Park in the near term, and how would you approach these?
I think I enjoyed having the opportunity to take a tour of the community today and driving around with your police chief. Having someone that's been here for decades gave me a great deal of insight of a lot of the issues going on in community, the challenging issues and the opportunities, and also did a great deal of research on the internet, trying to get a better understanding of it. And I got here yesterday a little early, so it gave me an opportunity to drive around and check off some things I'd looked at. The big challenge is the infrastructure issues and trying to come up with a plan how you're going to pay for it and identifying, making that a priority and coming up with a long-term capital improvement plan to make that happen, prioritizing those issues and realizing that if this is an A priority, then something else is potentially going to be a B priority, and it may be a B priority that some of you may love, but identifying the needs over the wants. Trying to look at the sites that you have here and try to bring in potential retail development into those locations. Had opportunity to look at those sites, did research on the Sears that you had here a number of years ago. Before it closed, it was generating a substantial amount of revenue. It was a very well-used site. And the decision to close it had nothing to do with the location. It had to do with what was going on with Sears. And in fact, at the time when you lost your Sears, I lost my Kmart in Rock Island. And we were able to repurpose that building, and U-Haul now has control of that building, and they utilize it fully without having to go through any kind of demolition. We were able to negotiate the sale of the building to them, and we were able to repurpose it. So just a few of the challenges that I see here. Getting a feel for the community, getting a feel for the staff here, and finding out the issues and the priorities. One thing I learned here, you have a long history of tenured employees here that I think have a great deal of value. They'll be an asset to me on my learning curve. But I've worked in multiple states, and I've been able to learn and adapt. So just an idea of some of the short-term and long-term issues and getting a full understanding of the finances and how I go about trying to get those things done, and which I think I have the skill set to get done.
Thank you, sir. Councilman Parkinson, the third question, please.
Mr. Thomas, nice name.
Thank you.
So you're coming here for the weather, I would,
Actually, the weather is very similar to where I am right now. I'm in Skokie, so it's,
wait till summer.
yes.
If selected as city manager, please tell us, how would approaching building trust approach building trust and respect of the employees in the community?
Well, I've always had an open door policy, and I stick to that. When a citizen or an employee wants to meet with me, they can schedule time to sit down and have a conversation with me. Secondly, within my first 100 days, I make the rounds with the department directors. If they're providing external services, I ride around with them and see those issues of concern. Internal, I find out what their operations are and how I can help them improve. And because of the size of the organization, I see no reason why within those first 100 days, I don't have an opportunity to meet every employee. Find out issues of concern that I can help them. Find out opportunities for additional education, additional training that could help them be better at their jobs. And also make them recognize by the city manager taking the time to meet with them to realize they have value to the organization. So just a few of the things. Also, in this day and age now, being able to use the social media in a better fashion. When things are coming up, being proactive when putting out information to educate people on the issues that need to be addressed. Establishing relationship with the social media, making sure they're up to date on the issue, developing that relationship. So don't wait till something bad happens until they call you. Be proactive and explain to them what's going on, because sometimes things can be very complex. The reporter doesn't have time to spend on it, and you have to be able to sit down and put it on that sort of a fifth grade level so they can understand what those issues are. So when the story comes out, it's a fair story and not put in a negative light. So those are just some of the few things I would do to begin to establish trust at the beginning of my tenure and transparency. And also dealing with the mayor and council finally. Never telling you one thing that I don't tell someone else. Sharing information all at the same time. Not letting more than 2 weeks go by without having some level of communication with each and every one of you. I'm a 24/7 guy. I've been doing this. I know how this works. Some of you may be retired. Some of you may have full-time jobs. Making myself available through the phone call, through email, through Skype, through meeting with you one-on-one, being willing to come to where you work to sit down to meet with you, addressing the issues of concern. So making myself available to have those open communications with you at all times, so you don't get caught off guard by something.
Okay. Councilman Higgins, the fourth question, please.
Again, welcome.
Thank you.
Please describe and in detail your approach to budgeting, including the process you will use to prioritize funding needs to communicate an important budget objects and to the elected officials and staff and community.
In the end, I think as I said before, I started out my career as a budget analyst, and in many ways I always kept that a part of my wheelhouse. I do zero-based budgeting. Within my first 100 days, I'd have an idea of the departments, what their spending is, what they're budgeting, because there's always a potential gap between what's budgeted and what's actually spent. Look for potential opportunities for savings, looking at those budgets. Looking for how we can prioritize what we're spending when I go through that. I put together a preliminary budget, meeting with the department directors. I sit down with the department director along with the finance director, and we go line by line over everything. That's the only way you can do it. I go over what they're spending on supplies. I go over what they're spending on, if you're external services, fuel. I go over what they're spending on sort of capital improvement type of things they want to purchase, vehicles, things of that nature. I project out the vehicles, what's the years of replacement. So I'm very detail-oriented going through the budget process. And I base my recommendations on what I've observed going through that, working with department directors. I put together a preliminary budget. Ideally, I would like to, because sometimes sending you a big, thick budget book with the recommendations in it can be very challenging. When I'm coming back with some tough recommendations, for instance, I'm recommending to cut something and give a detailed explanation, I am up to the task of bringing in council members in small groups and presenting it to you and going over the details of it unless you ask more detailed questions and let give you my explanations of why I'm making those recommendations. And also those meetings, that's when I find out something. While I may be looking at the brick and mortar or something, the strategic planning needs versus wants, you can also tell me something, whether you can tell me whether an issue is politically sensitive or not. Perfect example, my first year in Rock Island, I identified we were giving out free leaf bags every year to people to collect leaf bags. It was costing us about $50,000. And I said, well, why are we giving out free leaf bags when they can go to a store and buy them? So I was recommending to cut that program. When I met with the council member small groups, they said, no, we got to keep that. You understand, years ago, we implemented that to get rid of leaf burning. And part of the agreement is we give out free leaf bags. And there was nothing written down about why they made that decision. There wasn't a policy, it was just something they approved amongst themselves. So you've got to keep that in there because we don't want people to start burning leaves again. The reason I wanted to cut it is because we were giving out leaf bags. People were storing them in their garages. People were selling them, donating them to Goodwill. And I thought it was just something we were just spending money on. But because it was identified to me, meeting with the council members, this is why we do this, I continued the program. But I also identify capital projects, why I'm cutting this, and give a detailed explanation of why I'm making that decision. And I give you an opportunity to ask those detailed questions to flesh it out for you. And once I've got that feedback, I come back with a final budget. I try to, ideally, when we do budget presentations, do it on a Friday or a Saturday. Every department director comes to the table. I'm with them. They give an overview on a one-page sheet outlining the big-ticket issues they're doing in their departments. And they give you an opportunity to ask more detailed questions about that issue, and we have a dialogue. And we discuss, once again, why we're making those decisions. And we go through each department until we're done. I get big feedback from you. I review that. And I give you a summary report of the final decisions and final recommendations to the council. That's my process I've used for about 20 years.
Okay. Councilman Ross, if you'd take the fifth question, please.
Please describe your skills in the area of fiscal stewardship and what techniques you have followed in the past to manage government funds effectively.
Well, like I was highlighting earlier in my time doing Macon, Georgia, because I came into a situation that was so financially distressed, I had to come in and develop a long-term strategic financial plan. I had to establish financial policies for the first time. And I didn't do that in a vacuum. What helped me was doing my 6 years in Dougherty County when I worked under the county administrator who had been there 20-something years and working on those Saturdays and Sundays, going over the budget, crunching it, learning. I learned a great deal from him that helped me when I moved to that next level of being the city administrator. So long-term strategic financial plan, developing your capital projects, long-term spending, doing the zero-based budget, performance-based budgeting, looking for opportunities for public-private partnerships to cut down on any potential resources services you may be providing, looking for those opportunities. Maybe there's some services you can share with the county. Maybe there's some services you can share with the adjoining community. Having experience doing that during my time in Dougherty County. So looking for opportunities to have savings, but also continue to provide the same level of services. And I can give you more detailed examples if you want me to of things I've had to do just out of necessity to make things work.
How about one example?
Okay. During my during my time in Rock Island, we wanted to do a lot more redevelopment in our downtown area. We had a constant issue with housing. I developed a public-private partnership with Renaissance Rock Island, who was a nonprofit private sector organization. They were able to help me with leveraging of some federal dollars to build some housing in the downtown area for the first time. We started out during my time there building about 10 housing units. Because it was federal dollars, we had to set aside up to 30% for people who were financially challenged. And it was a huge success. We built 10 houses in the downtown area that had never been done before. And it brought people into the city, families, taxpayers, and it put that property that had been sitting dilapidated down there for a very long time back on the tax roll. That was an opportunity to bring in revenue. It was an opportunity to build housing. It was an opportunity to add to the tax base.
Good, thank you, sir. Councilman Kelsey for the sixth question.
Thank you. Welcome, by the way. No, it's not sunny outside, but it's still, it's the way the weather is in Michigan. Stick around, it'll change. What would you consider as essential in a relationship between the city manager and the city council, and how will you facilitate a productive relationship with the city council?
I believe fundamentally it has to be trust and transparency. As I said earlier, not telling you one thing that I don't share with everybody else. Keeping you up to date on issues going on in the community so you don't find out through a second or third party. For instance, if something happens on a big public safety issue that could have an impact on the community, I may establish trying to call you, I may send a group email, followed by a text, followed by trying to call you individually, instead of you having to find out some other way. Having those individual meetings with you to find out issues I can address in your neighborhood and your areas of concern that may not necessarily be a policy decision, but it's something as city manager I can take care of as an operations person. So establish those relationships of transparency, establish those relationships of trust, and you build that through accountability. You come to me with an issue, I research the issue, I find out how I can address the issue, and I have a conversation about some potential recommendations. And you build that up through a period of time. If I drop the ball on something, you hold me accountable for it. Finally, something I've done in other places I've worked is I do annual retreats with the mayor and council, where we set aside 2 days, I bring in a consultant, and we outline annual goals for the year, things we need to prioritize as a group. It's a way of building camaraderie between the mayor and council and myself, and it's also a way to find out how much all of you are alike. And you set those goals, you agree on those goals. I use those goals for setting goals for my department directors, and also those goals can be used to evaluate me on an annual basis. So that annual team building, the annual goal setting is vital to success. And I would definitely put that out as a challenge to you if I got this opportunity.
Councilman Salcido, the seventh question.
Yes, what do you consider as essential in the relationship between a city manager and a city staff, and how will you facilitate a productive relationship with the city staff?
Well, I manage by fact. I established meeting with my department directors, try to on a weekly basis to find out what's going on in their day-to-day operations and what's going on, things I can address, things I can help them to improve on. I also work with them to establish annual goals for them that they have to try to adhere to. Goals I get from the annual retreat with the mayor and council, but also goals I establish with them by looking at the department, because I've been doing this 25 years and I've gotten a good idea how different departments work and function, and there's different services that can be provided and can be improved upon. Secondly, the issue of leadership, I lead by example. I would not ask someone to do something that I would not be willing to do myself. Leading by example. Simple things, being to work on time, being transparent with them about everything that's going on. being straightforward with them about the goals I'm giving them and don't change it in midstream. Leave my ego at home when I come to work and try to establish a certain level of partnership that we're working on to achieve goals together. I learned growing up around my grandfather who ran a family business of 5 stores, and he worked 6 days a week and 12-hour days. And when I was old enough, starting college, I'd make the rounds working with him, working in convenience stores, liquor stores. I couldn't work in liquor stores yet at 18, but I got older, I could. And I learned that from him. He put in the work and the hours and the building of his business, and he did that until he retired at 80. And I learned leadership skills from him before I even started college about employees that worked with him for 20, 30 years. And those type of skills and relationships that I developed growing up.
Councilman Parkinson, the 8th question.
Do you need a drink of water?
Oh, no. I was just catching my
There's
breath.
water right there if you want to. What do you see as the city manager's role in communicating with the press and public, and how specifically do you plan to be successful in communicating with our community?
Establishing the relationship with the media from the very beginning. When I was in Rock Island, we had local NBC affiliate, CBS affiliate, ABC affiliate, Fox affiliate, and we also had 2 newspapers because it was all part of the whole Quad Cities area. Davenport, Rock Island, Moline, and what was it?
Bettendorf.
East Moline. And because of that, because of all of us together, it was a population of about 250,000, so we had a very busy press activity. Came to meetings on a weekly basis. And established that relationship where when our agenda goes out, they wait for it to go out at 3 o'clock, and I start getting the phone calls around 4 o'clock. And taking the time to have those conversations and address those issues on the agenda, the issues that may be of concern. If something's coming up on the agenda I think is going to be a hot issue of contention, getting out front with them on those issues, knowing it's coming up so they'll understand what it is. So we can have some input in what the outcome of the coverage is going to be. So establish those relationships early on and building that certain level of trust so I'm available to them. There are times I may tell them I can't discuss something because it may be a confidential issue, and they have to understand that. And also tell you it's just a recommendation, and you're the final decision makers.
Councilman Higgins, the 9th question.
Please describe the process you would utilize to recruit and select staff with the attention to making sure the candidate pool reflects the diversity of the community.
Well, I've had the opportunity in my career to do a lot of recruiting. I've recruited police chiefs, fire chiefs, director of public works, economic development, and all those recruiting processes. I've used the standard of having myself involved in it, HR director involved in it, subordinates from that department involved in the process, advertising the position nationwide, looking for the most qualified position, also giving employees internally to compete for the opportunity if they wanted to, and establishing a clear process of bringing in recruits, asking the same succinct questions, and looking for the most qualified candidate to fill the position. In regards to recognizing the community and recruiting in that manner, I think in my years of recruiting, I've always recruited the most qualified person, regardless of their background or where they're from. And I've always held to that standard. And in my career, I've recruited men, women, people from all ethnicity, religious backgrounds, or every level of position. I can provide their references, telling them they recruited them. But I've also been very successful in promoting from within. Last police chief I hired, he was a deputy chief, and he was able to be promoted. Had a fire chief who had been there a number of years. He competed for the position. He was able to be promoted to the position. So recruiting in a clear process of having a team to do the recruiting, giving your internal position people the opportunity to compete for the position, and getting the most qualified person for the position that reflects the needs of the community.
Councilwoman Ross, the 10th question.
Hope I answered your question, sir.
Yes, you did.
Please describe a situation you've handled where the community faced a contentious issue with strong, diverging opinions, and what did you learn from this experience?
Well, I mentioned something to you about the, in the state of Illinois a number of years ago, they passed a state guideline allowing for medical marijuana. It allowed the establishment of medical dispensaries and medical cultivation facilities. And they established different zones for it. We were approached by a company out of Denver that wanted to do a cultivation facility in Rock Island. We were also approached by this organization locally who wanted to do a dispensary in Rock Island. They had to go through a lot of hoops to qualify to meet the qualifications to do the dispensary and the cultivation facility. We identified a parcel of land in our light industrial section of town, away from any residential, retail. It was like a triangular space that really wasn't large enough to have anything done with it. They were interested in buying the property from us. The issue was first brought up, and I wanted to be proactive. I established a team of myself, the police chief, our director of community development, and our building official. I sent them out to Denver, Colorado to take a tour of cultivation facilities and of dispensary facilities to get feedback on how these operations work, to get a feel for how this can impact a community, and whether, give me all the pros and cons of it. They went out there for a few days. They came back with a comprehensive report for me to look at. We had multiple work sessions on this issue, hitting down the pros and cons of this issue, answering questions from citizens wanting to ask, find out more about the issue. Really, in our community, we didn't have much pushback from it. And through those work sessions, no one came out saying I'm ardently against it. And as a result, the council said, all right, we'll see what kind of deal comes of it. And then whatever you present to us, we'll decide whether we want to accept it or not. The company wanting to do the cultivation facility, they made us an offer for the property. They put together a design for how the building would be built. It went through all the processes of being approved by our police chief for security issues, building guidelines to be met. They pay for everything, access to the location, the roads and everything. We put together that deal. We presented it to the mayor and council, and they approved it. The dispensary issue was a little bit more challenging. The group that wanted to do it was having trouble on the financial end and wanted some incentives from the city, and I was unwilling to do that. I had some tried and true projects that I had in the hopper that I knew was going to be a sure win, and I did not feel that something this new I wanted to give in sort of incentives to it. Because they didn't have the financial assistance they wanted from us, they went over to a nearby city. But that was a decision I made based on not knowing what this is, because it was so new and wasn't as well established as other retail type businesses. And because I had concerns about if you're in trouble now financially, how you're going to look down the road. So we wind up turning the dispensary down. So that was an issue where we had to be very comprehensive on it. We had to build up a lot of trust with the mayor and council. We had to build up a lot of trust through education with the citizens. And I think because we were proactive, having those work session meetings, that kept it from becoming bigger instead of just dropping it in an agenda item in the council meeting and having somebody pull it up and show up at a meeting. We're concerned about crime and concerned about theft and concerned about all those other issues. So that was a challenging issue, and we were able to get through it.
Councilman Kelsey, the 11th.
Sure. How would you describe your management and leadership style? Please identify both strength and weakness related to your style.
My management leadership style, I've outlined that earlier. I can say it again. I lead by example. My management style, within my first 90 days, I have a feel of the strengths and weaknesses of my department directors. I establish whether some of them I can leave to work a little bit more independently and report back to me, and others I have to be more hands-on in helping them to develop their weaknesses and finding out where the long-term those weaknesses can be overcome for the organization. The weaknesses is something I consistently try to work on. Because I've been doing this 27 years, I have to watch myself not jumping from A to B too quickly and going through the steps of assessing, going through the steps of giving opportunities to improve and getting there. And that takes a lot more time because I've always felt that when someone reaches the point of being a department director, they're like a mini CEO. They should have a full understanding of the department. And if I reach 6 months and I know more about your department than you, that's something I have to go back and reassess and find out where the disparity is and what we can do to improve on that. So that's a weakness of something I've worked on for a number of years, and that's because I've been doing this so long, and I jump here and I have to walk myself back all the time. And then I have my wife to keep me from going too far in my overthinking about things.
Don't we all?
Diane Cosillon.
Councilman Salcedo?
Yes, I know you described the challenge
12.
earlier, but please describe the largest challenge the community had when you first started in one of your prior professional positions. How did you go about assessing and addressing the challenge?
One of the biggest challenges I had when I went to Rock Island, I had no experience negotiating with multiple unions. And there was a lot of concern they had about that because we had ASME A, ASME B, we had fire management, we had police, and we had police management, and I had no experience dealing with unions, and they were concerned about that because as I got there, we had the ASME coming up in 6 months. So spending the time becoming familiar with the contracts, finding out what the issues are, finding out right off the bat from talking to the union members that there was a problem with the labor attorney, putting that out to bid, because I thought that was something that had to be done if we were going to try some ambitious things, try some new ways of how we negotiate our agreements and try to get more long-term agreements. Before I got there, we were doing 2-3-year agreements, and sometimes by the time they approved the agreement, it was time to negotiate a new agreement. And that was always creating friction between the employees and management. So by doing those 5-year agreements, we had a certain level to breathe in between arguing about pay and ordering about education, ordering about incentives and everything. So that was my biggest challenge when I went to Rock Island, coming up to date on the union agreements, pushing through, bidding out, bringing in a new attorney. We wound up getting an attorney who lived in Rock Island, who had already been established doing union negotiations from other cities in the Quads area, but never had the opportunity to bid in his on his own hometown because we had had the same labor attorney for over 15 years and never bid it out again. And something like that should be bid out at least every 5 years. So that went a long way when we brought in somebody new, when we able to get those first 2 agreements, 5-year agreements, and that began to establish trust. So there was a lot of uncomfortableness in me coming in, having no labor negotiating experience, and how I was going to handle that.
Councilman Parkinson, the 13th question.
Okay, how would you approach the development of a 3 to 5 year strategic plan for the city? Once established, how would you facilitate the execution of such a plan?
Now, are we talking about just a strategic plan for the entire community or a strategic financial plan? Or which are we
Well,
talking?
the city has a 5 year plan, but so do other departments.
Okay.
So basically, it would be the city 5 year plan, then you'd go to each individual department after that.
Well, I build up from the bottom. I find out what their 5-year plans are and begin to establish from there how we can update them to fit in with the overall plan. And once again, this goes back to a good opportunity to discuss in more detail those things and do an annual retreat where you can hear about those long-term plans, and we build on that 1-year plan. And we try to figure out, is this thing achievable within that first year? Do we need to make adjustments? So meeting with department directors, find out where they are on achieving those 5-year plans, and also find out whether something is realistic or not. Sometimes something may not be able to be accomplished in that next year or two, either through limited resources, not only just financial, but staffing level. Separating need from wants. Do we want to replace those vehicles next year, or through proper maintenance, can we stretch it out to another year? Those kind of decisions you try to make. Updating our software. Yes, this software program has become old and dated. It's tough to use, but updating to a brand new system may cost this amount of money. But if we get this additional module for a lot less money, could you adapt and learn to use this new module to help you do the kind of writing in the system that you want to do? So building up from the bottom, working on their 5-year plan, meeting with them, going over with them, and dovetailing those 5-year plans into the overall plan for the city.
Okay.
Hope I answered you.
You did.
Yeah, okay.
Councilman Higgins, the 14th question.
Community involvement is important to the city. Please describe how you would plan to personally become more involved with the community.
I've learned through experience being a city manager is a 24/7 job. While you may not be elected, the citizens treat you as though you are. The fact that they want to come and talk to you about issues of concern, from a pothole to an issue that hadn't been resolved regarding a nuisance regarding grass not being cut in a timely manner by a neighbor or a dog, and they don't think the issue was resolved in a timely manner. Becoming involved in the community, being involved with the chamber, being involved with, I spent many years during my time in Illinois being involved in Rotary. I'm a member of Rotary. Big public events like in what you do in December, being involved in that. Every year, Rock Island had an annual Labor Day parade, and I rode the golf cart handing out candy to kids. So being open and out there, and after the first year, people should not only know my name, but they should recognize what I look like. Go to community events, and my wife is aware of that. Going to community events is part of the job, and being involved in those types of activities. And you may not be able to go to everything, but try to make yourself available to everything you possibly can. Not in addition to the city events, but all non-city events that may occur that's important going on, that could have impact on the community, that you guys attend. I'm going to show up and try to attend as well. And that's part of the job, even though it may happen on a Saturday or a Sunday.
And Councilwoman Ross, question 15.
Nationally, the average city manager tenure is 4 years. If selected as our next city manager, what do you predict your tenure would be?
Well, I was in Rock Island for 5 years. I was in Alaska a year, but that was a special reason why I left there. It was a remote area, and my wife and kids just had difficulty adapting to being there. I was in Macon for 3 years. Before that, I was in Doherty County for 6 years. So I've had pretty good long tenures in places. I try to stay minimum 5 to 10 years, depending on whether the community likes me. I decide whether I stay longer after that. And of course, it's on a case-by-case basis. At the end of the first year, you decide whether you like me, whether I like you, and whether we want to continue working together. And I build on that from there. But I don't like coming somewhere and staying short-term, because I think it's important for a community to have some level of longevity in the manager and building up a certain level of consistency in how we do things. And the longer I'm at a place, the more valuable I become, because I build up a history of things, learn how to get things done quicker.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, finally, we're going to have you wrap things all up and give us up to 5 minutes to basically why you're the best candidate for us.
I think I'm the best candidate for the job because I bring 27 years of experience to the job, working in multiple states, multiple organizations, working from all different disciplines of ways to improve things. I think I've worked in economic development, I've dealt with public works, I've dealt with infrastructure, I've dealt with something in dealing with the casinos. I dealt with everything from dealing with updating $40 million docks on the Bering Sea. I think I bring the many years of experience that would make me be an asset to your organization. Touring your community today and researching your community, what you're trying to do and achieve here is very similar to what I spent 5 years in Rock Island doing. From the issues along the river, being along the Mississippi River, being up to date on flooding issues, being prepared to put up temporary panels and keeping levees up to date, having a plan in place for emergency management and issues like that arise. Being a community 98% built out, I think is easily transferable to here. Knowing that when you're trying to do economic development, it's going to be more expensive and harder here because you're doing redevelopment, dealing with issues with potential Brownsville, deal with those issues, and establishing relationships, working with the county and the state. You can't do it alone. So I think those many years of experience working in multiple areas would make me an asset to your organization. I didn't use all 5 minutes, but I think
That's welcome, trust me. You can say a lot in 5 minutes, is all I have to say on that. Well, thank you. James is going to can answer any questions that you may have, and ladies and gentlemen, you need
I'm sick.
you need a couple minutes.
Yes, please.
Thomas?